Thank you so much for tuning in to this segment of Community Wise. This month, we celebrate the oldest known African American tradition in the country, Juneteenth. Juneteenth is about our past and it's about our future. Today, we celebrate Juneteenth and focus on economic development, health, wealth, and success for the community. Therefore, we have invited Ms. Shahrazad Perkins to talk to us about developing the next generation of leaders. Thank you, Sherry, so much for being a guest this month.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. I admire your leadership skills. And so one of the things I'd like to talk about is, what is a leader?
Gosh, you know, when I think about the characteristics of a leader in terms of definition, I guess I'd have to say that a leader has to have some understanding of where we are.
Okay.
Perhaps some grasp of how we got here. Certainly a vision of where we need to go.
Okay.
And needs to possess the ability to motivate or inspire people to head in that direction. You know, now that I've said head in that direction, I really probably should say lead people in that direction. You've heard the old expression, you can't lead where you don't go, and you can't teach what you don't know, and you certainly can't preach what you don't show. And so the leaders, I think, need to lead us in the direction that they're inspiring us to go.
Great, great. You know, experts tell us that we need to find great leaders, look at their lives, examine their lives, tear their lives apart, and then learn what are their best practices for leadership. I know I have several leaders that I admire. Of course, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Harriet Tubman, Oprah Winfrey, and a whole lot more. Who are your leaders that you study and admire?
I guess I should take a little bit of a risk here and tell you that at the very top of my list is Yeshua, or Jesus.
Okay. All right.
Clearly, that is the exemplary leader of all times.
Great. Best servant leader.
Best servant leader that any of us knows about. And so I would start with that one.
Good choice.
From a biblical standpoint, we don't go much further without looking at Moshe, or Moses, who was instrumental in leading 600,000 men, at least, out of Egypt toward the promised land, and countless more women and children. And so to have the kind of charisma that it takes to take people out of what they knew into something they didn't know takes some kind of leadership potential. But let me quickly go to people that I know personally. I know Yeshua personally, don't get me wrong, but people that touch my lives right here and now in the tangible. I'd have to go to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Luther Mitchell. My father's deceased now, but clearly they showed exemplary leadership skills in the home and in the community. I'd have to talk about my pastor, Galen C. Clark, out of Austin, Texas, who is leading a congregation of God-fearing people. Excellent. I have to talk about one of my professors, Oscar Mink, who led me in my graduate study. Jim Sebascu and Bud Haney at Profiles International, I work for currently, are clearly leading some 40,000 clients around the world. And then I'm looking at a leader, Levita.
Oh, thank you.
I can't help but mention you with a very small team. Clearly, you are exemplifying leadership by engaging the community. You couldn't get everything done with 3 folks. So we know that your leadership is inspiring the community to move forward.
Thank you so much.
How's that?
I appreciate that. Now that we've covered that, what are some of the characteristics? What are the things that you see in these leaders that are worthy of their leadership abilities?
Well, now you're taking me to some academic work. We've actually done some research on that subject. And so we've come up with 8 universal leadership competencies that seem to traverse all of those leaders, or at least the leaders that we deem to be effective.
Okay.
So 8 universal competencies and some 18 skill sets seem to comprise the attributes of leaders. But right at the top of those, more so than ever before, we're looking at integrity, trustworthiness, character, high moral fiber. And then closely aligned with that is communication. Are you able to communicate your thoughts? You may have a fabulous idea, but if you can't get that message across, and if you can't rally the troops, you can't get things done. And very, very few leaders get things done on their own. So they've got to engage people to help them get the job done. So that communication style and that charisma that makes you want to charge the hill, if you will. I can remember working for managers that back in the day, we used to have to go look for bombs in the building. Now, I didn't know what a bomb looked like, and I didn't know what to do with it when I found it. But because I believed in those leaders, I went into Marine territory and looked for bombs in a building because I believed in those leaders.
Awesome.
So I think having the charisma that inspires people to follow you, I think having the belief in people, because you can't get it done by yourself, so you have to invest and value the people that are surrounding you. I think those are the 4 that I would pick out of all the 18.
I agree. Thank you so much for that. How do we develop the next generation of leaders?
You know, we give a lot of thought to that. We ask the question, for example, are leaders born, or are indeed they developed? And so we know that there are some attributes that are innate. There are some things about us that make us have a natural assertiveness, if you will. There are some things about us that make us have a natural collaborative spirit where we can engage the talents of others. We know that there's something to be said about people who are naturally decisive versus those who, no matter how much information you give them, they can't make a decision. So some of those attributes we think come with the territory, come with a person. But without some skill development, those innate abilities or those natural charisma, natural things don't ever really come into fruition. They don't really rise to the occasion because some of them lie dormant. Some of them we don't know how to execute. And so I think the way we do that is to determine, first of all, what makes a solid leader? And then a leader in what environment?
Okay.
Clearly, the leader in your environment is different than the leader perhaps in a corporate setting. Maybe the leader in that setting is different than one in the educational setting or one in a medical setting. So we have to understand what works in what setting, what's really needed. And then when we do that, then we can look at those people who aspire to leadership and say, where are the gaps? What's needed? What's possessed, and where are the gaps, and what might we do to encourage people to want to take on those positions? So as I look at how we start to envelop those people in our organization, embrace those people, I think I have to take them on an individual basis. You know, just as there is situational leadership, there is situational leadership development. Perhaps I could summarize three or so things that I think we could do to help develop them, to get them a running start. One of the things that we do is understand this generation that is behind us. And although I'd be hard-pressed to stereotype people, I do know that there are some things that are needed. Clearly, they need to be understood as individuals and appreciated wherever they are. We don't need to make them us. We need to make them or encourage them to be the leaders that will be needed when leadership is called for. So don't try to pigeonhole them into a certain leadership style that worked for us. Encourage them to find out what works best for them, what motivates them, what inspires them, what brings out their very best, and have them develop those strengths.
Right. I think also verbal blessings play a big part in making, helping develop the next generation of leaders. I practice verbal blessings on a regular basis. I try to say something that would encourage and inspire, especially the young kids. Sometimes we see children who don't feel good about themselves. They're in a negative environment. And so I think it's important that we practice those characteristics as well, just empowering, inspiring, encouraging, building up and edifying the next generation, and avoiding put downs and avoiding any negative comments, because it's difficult to develop a leader if you're developing them and feeding into them negative ideas and negative spirits.
I love that. I think that for me, having someone tell me no plan B. Now, for most of us, we start out and we say, if I don't achieve this, or if I don't get here, my next option might be this. But when I tell people to persevere their dreams, their goals, their aspirations, go for the top, because you can do all things. And the minute you divide your energy along a plan B, that says that you have taken away from your plan A. And so telling them to go after it with a fury, go after it with a passion, to accept no limitations because your creator says that you have no limitations in me, I think sort of sets the tone and direction. The other thing that I would suggest to people is that they persevere in spite of the pain and in spite of the fear. Now, I say that because some of us don't ever get started because we're afraid. Some of us are even afraid, can you believe it? Afraid of succeeding. We don't know what we'd do if we succeeded.
Right.
And so we try to play that chess game out all the way to the end. And as soon as we get to a place on the chessboard where we don't know what's going to happen, or we have apprehension about it, we stop dead in our tracks. And so persevere beyond the fear.
Right.
The fear of failure, the fear of what's going to come. My mom used to say, go as far as you can see, then you can see further, but go. And the other thing is there will be pain.
Right.
You have to push beyond the pain. Just because you have pain is a sign of life. Nah. If you no longer hurt, you no longer have life. And so one of the things that I tried to do, and I'll tell you real quickly, is to face fears head on. One of my greatest
That's one of the
fears.
things I like about you.
One of my greatest fears was a fear of height. It was immobilizing. I couldn't go to the top of a grandstand. I couldn't enjoy the Grand Canyon. I couldn't stand in an elevator that was glass enclosed. And so what I did was say, this will no longer rule me. And so I did a 13,500-foot skydive at age, I won't even tell you. And so I think we got to face our fears.
Exactly.
The last thing I tell the generation is to value the people around you. Take the time to build relationships, to build strong, honest relationships, the kind of relationships where people will tell you the truth and not just what you want to hear.
All right.
I think those are the things that if you can surround yourself by people who are talented, who value you and you value them, surround yourself with people who will be candid with you, even when the candor might pinch a little bit. I think because you're going to need people all the way.
Right.
That's what I do.
One of the things I think is important also, Sherry, is that you can if you think you can, but you've got to have a plan. Most people don't have a plan. They don't have a vision for how they're going to lead or what they're going to do in their lives or what they're going to accomplish. That's the last thing I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about.
I think that's it says no. If you don't plan, any place you end up is fine. And so I certainly encourage people to put a plan in place. And that doesn't mean that as they go along their pathway that their plan won't be refined, that they won't have additional places along that plan that materialize and have greater tangibility. But you have to start someplace. And so I tell people to start with the end in mind, or begin, as Covey says, with the end in mind. And
Exactly.
so put things down. Make sure that those plans have as much meat on the bone as you can place on them. How does it look? How does it feel? How does it smell? Who's there? What does it look like? Whose life are you going to be impacting? How will that transmit into resources, and how will it transmit into end results for a particular business or organization? Put as much tangibility in that as possible, and that level of tangibility will give you even more information to put into your plan.
If you design your life, I have a design for my life, and I think it's important that people design their lives. I thank you so much for being here, Sherry.
Wow.
I thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next segment.